Rain fell in sheets across the cemetery, turning the earth to mud and memory. James Hartwell stood at 8 years old, small hands clenched at his sides, watching strangers lower his father into the ground. The casket was mahogany, expensive, cold. Water pooled in the open grave. Someone was crying, not James. James had learned something important that morning. His grandfather's hand gripped his shoulder, fingers pressing through the black suit jacket that hung too large on his narrow frame. William Hartwell stood like carved stone beside him, silver hair perfect despite the storm, eyes forward, jaw set. The old man waited until the last shovel of dirt fell before he spoke. "Come." They walked through the cemetery in silence, past rows of headstones that blurred in the rain. William's town car waited at the gate, engine running, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the deluge. The driver opened the door. James climbed inside. His shoes were caked with mud. His grandfather noticed but said nothing. The car pulled away from the cemetery, away from the father James would never see again, away from the life where someone had kissed him goodnight and called him buddy and taught him how to throw a baseball. William Hartwell sat beside his grandson, studying the boy's profile in the gray afternoon light. "You were crying," William said finally. Not a question, a statement. James turned to look at him. Rain streaked the windows. "Dad is gone." "Yes." "Forever." "Yes." James felt something hot behind his eyes, pressure building in his throat. He looked down at his hands, small, useless, unable to stop anything. "Look at me," his grandfather commanded. James looked. William Hartwell's face was stone, carved from the same mountain as his empire. No tears, no trembling, no weakness of any kind, just certainty, hard and unyielding as winter. "Hartwells don't cry in public," William said, each word deliberate, precise. "Grief is private. Weakness is a choice. The world respects strength. Remember that." James swallowed hard. The tears that wanted to come stayed locked behind his eyes. He nodded. "Say it," William instructed. "Weakness is a choice," James repeated, voice small but steady. Again. "Weakness is a choice," his grandfather nodded once, satisfied. Then he turned to look out the window at the rain, at the city passing by, at the empire that would one day belong to James if he proved worthy. The conversation was over. James sat very still, hands folded in his lap, tears turning to ice somewhere deep inside his chest. That day, James Hartwell learned to bury his heart. It took a 6-year-old girl to teach him how to find it again. 30 years later, James Hartwell stood at the head of the boardroom table like a judge preparing to deliver sentence. Monday morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across polished mahogany. Outside, Manhattan stretched in all directions, steel and glass reaching toward winter clouds heavy with the season's first snow. Inside Hartwell Industries headquarters, 52nd floor, executive suite, the air conditioning hummed at exactly 68 degrees. James preferred cold. Cold kept people sharp. 12 board members sat in leather chairs worth more than most cars, tablets glowing, coffee cooling in porcelain cups. Nobody spoke. They were waiting. James let them wait. He stood at the head of the table, suit charcoal gray, tie burgundy, not a thread out of place, studying the quarterly report projected on the screen behind him. Red numbers highlighted inefficiencies, yellow marked areas of concern. His jaw tightened. "Q3 revenue down 4%, James said finally, voice carrying the same cold precision his grandfather had perfected decades ago. "Operating costs up 6, profit margins compressed to unacceptable levels." He turned to face the room. 12 sets of eyes avoided his. "Good. They should be uncomfortable." "Manufacturing is bleeding money," James continued. "Distribution is slow. Marketing spend is up with negligible ROI, and accounting." He paused, gaze landing on Stephen Martinez, the CFO who had served Hartwell Industries for 20 years. "Accounting approved expenditures outside authorization protocols." Stephen shifted in his chair. "Sir, those expenditures were for employee retention programs. Exit interviews showed morale issues related to last year's restructuring, so I authorized team-building initiatives to address concerns before they impacted productivity further." "Did I approve these initiatives?" No, but given the strategic importance of maintaining workforce stability during the Henderson acquisition, I believe discretionary spending was warranted under my purview as CFO to prevent talent hemorrhage that could compromise integration timelines. James studied him. Stephen Martinez had 3 children in college, a mortgage in Connecticut, a wife who volunteered at the local library. Photos on his desk showed family vacations, graduations, smiling faces at weddings. James had attended the wedding of Stephen's eldest daughter 2 summers ago, stood in the back during the ceremony, left before dinner. Sentiment doesn't sustain companies, James said, voice empty of inflection. Efficiency does. Your discretionary spending cost us $2 million. $2 million that should have gone to shareholders, to growth, to securing our competitive advantage in an increasingly hostile market. Instead, it went to pizza parties and trust falls. Stephen's face went pale. Sir, I can provide documentation showing correlation between engagement initiatives and reduced turnover, which saved recruiting and training costs that exceeded the expenditure by a factor of 3 to 1 based on conservative estimates of replacement expenses. James opened a folder, slid it across the table. Your termination papers. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Silence crashed through the room like a wave breaking against stone. Stephen stared at the folder. His hand trembled as he reached for it. James, please. 20 years. Which is precisely why you should have known better. I have a family. You should have thought of that before authorizing unapproved expenditures. Stephen Martinez stood slowly, legs uncertain, face the color of old paper. He picked up the folder. He looked around the table at colleagues who had shared coffee with him for 2 decades, who had celebrated promotions and commiserated over setbacks, who now studied their tablets with intense focus because eye contact meant complicity. Nobody spoke. Stephen walked to the door. His hand rested on the handle for one long moment. Then he pulled it open and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of something. James turned back to the room. Anyone else need clarification on authorization protocols? Heads shook in unison. Good. Next quarter, I expect 4% growth minimum. No excuses. Dismissed. The board members filed out in silence. Coffee abandoned. Conversations postponed. Relieved to escape. Only Robert Caldwell remained, the silver-haired chairman of the board, 70 years old and sharp as broken glass. He had known William Hartwell. He had watched James grow from a boy in an oversized suit to the man who now ran his grandfather's empire with the same ruthless precision. That was cold, even for you, Caldwell said quietly. James collected his tablet. It was necessary. Was it? Stephen made a judgment call, one that actually improved retention numbers, which you didn't mention. He saved this company millions over the years with his financial acumen and institutional knowledge that's irreplaceable in an industry where relationships and historical context matter. He violated protocol. He showed initiative. James looked at him. You disagree with the decision? Caldwell stood, buttoned his suit jacket. I'm saying you sound more like your grandfather every day. And your grandfather, for all his brilliance, died alone in a hospital room with nobody holding his hand because everyone who might have cared was either too afraid of him or too damaged by him to show up. James felt nothing, or rather, he felt the same cold certainty that had guided every decision for 30 years. My grandfather built an empire. He built a fortune. There's a difference. Caldwell walked toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Your brother understood that. The mention of Thomas hit like a punch James didn't see coming. His jaw tightened. My brother is dead. I know. I was at the funeral, remember? Caldwell's eyes held something that might have been pity. You stood alone at the grave, didn't cry, just like your grandfather taught you. William would have been proud. He left. James stood in the empty boardroom, city sprawling below, tablet cooling in his hand. On the screen, numbers glowed. Profit margins, revenue projections, market share. Everything measurable, quantifiable, reducible to data points that told him whether he was winning or losing. He was winning. He had been winning for 15 years straight. So why did victory feel like standing at the edge of a cliff? His phone buzzed. Maya Patel, his assistant, her voice professional and precise through the speaker. Sir, the Chicago investor meeting has been rescheduled to 6 p.m. to accommodate Mr. Chen's flight delay. Traffic to O'Hare suggests departure by 3 at the latest to ensure timely arrival with buffer for security delays. James checked his watch. Noon. 6 hours until he needed to leave. 6 hours of meetings, calls, decisions that would determine the trajectory of companies and careers and families dependent on paychecks that existed because James Hartwell made the right choices. Or the cold ones. Sometimes they were the same thing. Understood, he said. Block my calendar. I need to review the Henderson integration docs before Chicago. Already on your desk, sir. Also, Mr. Martinez's security escort is requesting guidance on severance package terms pending legal review. Standard package. Nothing extra. A pause. Maya rarely paused. Sir, 20 years of service typically warrants consideration for enhanced terms under company precedent, established during the Westfield restructuring in 2019, when senior executives received additional compensation reflecting their tenure and contributions. Are you questioning my decision? No, sir. Simply ensuring consistency with prior practice to minimize potential litigation exposure that could arise from disparate treatment of similarly situated employees given recent EEOC guidance on age discrimination and termination decisions affecting employees over 50. James closed his eyes briefly. Maya was 30, brilliant, tireless, and occasionally possessed enough courage to push back when his decisions veered into legally questionable territory. It was why he trusted her. Trust was rare. Competence was rare. Enhanced package, unconceded. Draft the amendment. Yes, sir. The line went dead. James gathered his materials, walked through the executive suite to his corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls. Minimalist furniture. No plants. No personal effects except one framed photograph on his desk. The photograph showed 2 men standing in front of Hartwell Manor, the Connecticut estate where William Hartwell had ruled his empire from a study lined with law books and portraits of ancestors who had built railroads and steel mills and fortunes that survived depressions and wars. James stood on the left, 35 years old, expression serious. Thomas stood on the right, 30, smiling like someone had just told the world's best joke. Brothers, 3 years before Thomas died. James sat at his desk, looked at the photograph, felt nothing stir in the ice where his heart used to be. Then he opened his laptop and began to work. By 3 o'clock, snow had begun to fall. James stood at his office window, watching flakes drift past glass, melting on contact with the warmer city air below. Traffic was already snarling. Red taillights stretched in lines toward bridges and tunnels that would carry commuters home to families waiting in houses that smelled like dinner and sounded like laughter. James had a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, 32nd floor, 2,000 square feet of empty rooms. His phone buzzed. Maya. Car is ready, sir. Driver suggests departing now given deteriorating weather conditions and accident reports causing delays on the expressway. James grabbed his coat, briefcase, phone. The drive to the airport would take an hour, maybe more in snow. The meeting in Chicago would run until 9. He would fly back on the company jet, land at Teterboro around midnight, reach his apartment by 1. Sleep 4 hours, wake at 5. Repeat. This was success. This was what winning looked like. The elevator descended in silence, executive level to lobby, emptying into marble and chrome, where security guards nodded as he passed. His car waited at the curb, black Mercedes, heated leather, privacy glass. James climbed in. The driver pulled into traffic without a word. They had worked together for 3 years. James knew the man's first name was David. Nothing else. David drove. James worked. That was the arrangement. Traffic crawled through Midtown. Snow fell heavier now, fat flakes coating windshields faster than wipers could clear them. Brake lights glowed red through the white. James checked his phone. Emails multiplied like bacteria. He responded with brutal efficiency, making decisions in seconds that would take others hours to deliberate. Buy, sell, approve, deny, forward, delete. The tyranny of choice, reduced to binary outcomes. Sir, David said from the front seat, first words in 20 minutes. Expressway is completely stopped. Accident near the tunnel. Might be faster to detour through Union Station. Catch the train to the airport. James looked up. They were stopped at an intersection, snow accumulating, traffic immobile in every direction. Union Station sat 2 blocks east. He could walk there in 5 minutes, catch the airport express, save an hour. Do it, James said. David turned right, navigated through side streets where snow hadn't yet paralyzed movement, pulled to the curb outside Union Station. The building loomed above them, classical architecture covered in white, columns holding up a pediment carved with words James had never bothered to read. People hurried in and out, collars up, heads down against the weather. "I'll call when I land," James told David. "Have someone meet me at Teterboro." "Yes, sir." James stepped out into the snow, briefcase in hand, coat buttoned against wind that cut through wool and skin and bone. Union Station's entrance yawned before him, warm lights spilling out onto frozen stone. He climbed the steps and walked inside. Heat hit him first, then noise. Then the sheer mass of humanity compressed into a space designed to move people from one place to another, to facilitate departures and arrivals, to be the threshold between leaving and coming home. James stopped just inside the entrance, studying the space like an architect examining a blueprint. The main concourse stretched before him, vaulted ceilings soaring overhead, departure boards clicking as they updated arrivals and delays. People moved in currents, invisible rivers flowing toward platforms and exits and ticket counters. Families clustered around luggage. Business travelers typed on phones while walking, trusting muscle memory to navigate obstacles. Teenagers sprawled on benches, headphones on, somewhere else entirely. James checked his watch. 45 minutes until the airport express. Time to grab coffee, review the Chicago presentation one more time, prepare for the negotiation that would determine whether Hartwell Industries acquired a semiconductor manufacturer in Taiwan or walked away leaving $3 billion on the table. He walked toward the coffee shop on the north end of the concourse, weaving through foot traffic with practiced efficiency. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Maya confirming his train departure time. He typed a response without breaking stride. Then he heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist in a train station filled with announcements in rolling suitcases and 1,000 conversations blending into white noise. A sound so small it should have been swallowed by everything else but somehow cut through like a knife, finding the gap between ribs. A child, crying. James stopped walking. He turned his head, scanning the crowd, searching for the source of the sound that had pierced through 30 years of carefully constructed emotional armor without permission. There, near Platform 9, a small figure in red standing perfectly still while hundreds of people flowed around her like water around a stone. James altered his path, briefcase forgotten, coffee postponed, something old and buried stirring in his chest without his consent. He walked toward Platform 9, toward the crying child, toward the moment that would change everything. She was 6 years old and drowning on dry land. Emma Rivera stood at the edge of Platform 9, small hands locked around the handle of a red suitcase almost as tall as she was. Her coat was red too, bright against the gray of winter, but stained and worn at the edges. White dress underneath, the kind worn for special occasions, now dirty and wrinkled from days of wear. Her hair hung in dark curls around a face too thin, too pale, eyes too large and watchful. She wasn't crying now. James had been wrong about that. The sound he heard was someone else's child, already swept away by parents toward platforms and departure times. Emma stood in silence, chest rising and falling with careful breaths, every muscle tense, a rabbit frozen in headlights while predators circled just outside her peripheral vision. 2 police officers knelt in front of her. Detective Catherine Morrison, 42, 15 years on the force, mother of 2, speaking in the gentle voice reserved for frightened children. Officer Hayes beside her, younger, less certain, hand resting near his radio like he expected trouble but didn't know what kind. James stopped 20 feet away, standing against a pillar where he could observe without intruding. Something about the scene held him in place. The child's posture, the desperate grip on the suitcase, the way her eyes tracked every person who passed too close. He recognized that stance. Fight or flight suspended in the terrible moment before choice becomes action. "Sweetheart," Detective Morrison was saying, voice warm and patient, "can you tell me your name?" The girl said nothing. "It's okay," Nobody's mad. We just want to help. Where's your mommy? Emma's chest hitched. For a moment, James thought she might cry again, might break open into the kind of tears that bring adults running with tissues and reassurance and promises that everything will be okay. But she didn't. She swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and spoke in a voice so small James almost missed it. She went to get help. Detective Morrison exchanged a glance with Officer Hayes. When did she leave, honey? Before the snow. Emma looked up at the vaulted ceiling, at windows showing white sky, snowflakes drifting past glass. It wasn't snowing yet. Now it is. That was days ago, Hayes said quietly. Not to Emma, to Morrison. Morrison nodded, kept her eyes on the child. What's your name, sweetheart? Long pause, then so quiet James had to lean forward to hear. Emma. Emma, that's a beautiful name. Morrison's smile was genuine, practiced, the expression of someone who had delivered terrible news and pulled children from worse situations, who knew that sometimes the only thing standing between a kid and the abyss was patience and warmth and refusing to give up. Emma, where do you live? Emma's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. Her knuckles went white. She looked at Morrison, then at Hayes, then at the platform behind them where her mother had said to wait, where waiting had turned into days and days, into nights and nights, into this moment, where strangers were asking questions that had answers she was terrified to give. Here, Emma whispered. Morrison blinked. Here? Like near here? In the neighborhood? Emma shook her head slowly. She pointed at the bench behind her, at the spot where she had spent 5 nights curled into a ball with her suitcase clutched to her chest and her eyes half open because sleeping meant vulnerability and vulnerability meant danger. I live here, Emma said again, louder now, voice cracking. At the station. Mom said wait right here. She said don't move. She said she'd come back before dark. Her eyes shone with tears that wouldn't fall. I waited. I'm still waiting. The weight of those words hit Morrison like a fist. Her professional composure cracked for half a second, pain flashing across her face before training reasserted control. Hayes looked away, jaw tight. James felt something break inside his chest. A sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake, the moment before everything gives way. Morrison recovered, voice gentle. Emma, honey, we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere warm. You can't stay at this station. I can, Emma said quickly, desperately. I can be quiet. I won't bother anyone. I know where the bathrooms are, and which people give food, and how to sleep sitting up so nobody comes too close. I can live here, I have before. Sweetheart, no, you're a little girl. You need a home, adults to take care of you, school, friends, all the things kids should have. Emma was shaking her head, backing away now, dragging the suitcase with her, eyes going wide with terror. No, if I leave, she won't find me. She said, right here. She said, don't move no matter what. She's coming back. She promised. Emma, listen to me. Morrison stood slowly, hands out, non-threatening. Your mom, I'm sure she wanted to come back. I'm sure she tried. But sometimes things happen that are nobody's fault, and we need help from other people to make things better. She's coming back. We need to take you to people who can help find your mom. They're nice people. They have warm places for kids to stay while we figure things out. You'd have a bed, food, toys maybe. Would you like that? Emma's breathing turned rapid, shallow, panic rising like water in a sinking ship. She clutched the suitcase to her chest, stumbling backward until she hit the metal railing that separated platform from concourse. The impact made a sound like a bell tolling. People glanced over, curious, then looked away because other people's problems weren't their concern and trains didn't wait. I didn't do anything wrong, Emma cried, voice climbing toward hysteria. I'm not bothering anyone. Please don't make me leave. Please. She won't know where to find me. She'll come back and I'll be gunning and she'll think I left her and I didn't. I didn't leave. I waited like she said. I promise I waited. Tears were streaming now, hot and fast down cheeks red from cold and fear and exhaustion. So profound it seemed to radiate from her small body like heat from concrete after sunset. She was breaking. James could see it happening, could see the moment when waiting turned from hope into despair, when a 6-year-old who had survived on the streets through sheer stubborn will finally hit the wall where courage runs out. Morrison reached for her. Emma, please, let me help you. No! Emma jerked away, lost her balance, fell. The suitcase tumbled from her grip, hit the floor with a thud. The latches popped. The case opened. Contents spilled across dirty tile. A white dress carefully folded. A stuffed rabbit, brown fur matted, one ear torn nearly off. A drawing, crayon on paper, showing three stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Mom, Emma, and maybe the father who had left before she was born. And beneath it all, a small plastic bag holding granola bar wrappers, empty juice boxes, the detritus of survival pieced together from garbage and charity. Emma scrambled for the suitcase, sobbing now, trying to gather everything back inside before it disappeared like everything else in her life had disappeared. Her hands shook. The rabbit fell again. She grabbed it, pressed it to her face, and the sound that came out of her was the sound of something breaking that couldn't be repaired. James dropped his briefcase. He walked forward without thinking, without planning, without the careful calculation that governed every decision in his ordered life. He walked toward the crying child and the spilled suitcase and the terrible moment where hope collapses under the weight of reality. Morrison and Hayes looked up as he approached, surprise on their faces, wariness replacing it when they registered his expensive suit and cold expression. Sir, Morrison began, this is a police matter. We appreciate your concern, but we need to handle this according to protocol, and you'll need to step back, please. James ignored her. He knelt on the floor beside Emma, knees touching cold tile, suit pants absorbing grime he would normally never tolerate. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible, non-threatening. Emma clutched the rabbit, watching him through tears, body coiled to run. James picked up the drawing. He studied it, the careful crayon lines, the yellow sun, the stick figures holding hands. He held it out to Emma. This is beautiful, he said quietly. Did you make this? Emma stared at him, nodded slowly. For your mom? Another nod. James set the drawing carefully back in the suitcase. Then he picked up the folded dress, placed it beside the drawing, the granola wrappers, the juice boxes, each item handled with care, with respect, as if they weren't trash but treasures. Because to Emma, they were. They were everything. When the suitcase was packed again, James closed it gently. He didn't hand it to Emma. He just held it, waiting, showing that he wasn't taking it away, just keeping it safe until she was ready. Emma's breathing slowed, the sobs quieted to hiccups. She looked at James, at his face, searching for something. Threat, lies, the thousand ways adults hurt children without meaning to or caring if they did. She studied his eyes, looking for the trap. James met her gaze without flinching, without softening his expression into the false warmth adults wore when trying to manipulate kids into compliance. He just looked at her, saw her, let himself be seen. What's your name? James asked, voice low enough that only Emma could hear. Long pause, then, Emma. I'm James. He offered his hand. Emma didn't take it. James lowered it without offense. Emma, can I ask you something? She nodded barely, still clutching the rabbit. The suitcase, it's important to you? It has my things. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Everything important. Mom said keep it safe no matter what. So I did. I kept it safe. You did a good job. It looks very well cared for. Emma glanced at the suitcase, something like pride flickering across her face before fear swallowed it again. If I lose it, I lose everything. I understand. Do you? Challenge crept into her voice, doubt born from too many adults who said they understood and didn't. Do you know what it's like to carry everything you have in a suitcase? James thought about his apartment, thought about walking through rooms filled with furniture and possessions and things that meant nothing. Thought about the hollowness of wealth when there's nobody to share it with, when success becomes prison and the walls are made of ice. No, he admitted, I don't know what that's like, but I know what it's like to be afraid, and I know what it's like to wait for someone who doesn't come back. Emma studied him again, longer this time, weighing his words against the evidence of his expensive clothes and cold face and hands that had probably never known hunger or desperation. She was 6 years old, but she had lived a lifetime in 5 days at Union Station, and she knew how to read people because survival depended on it. Your mom, Emma asked finally. My brother. Understanding passed between them. The shared language of loss, spoken without words, acknowledged in the space where grief lives after everything else goes silent. Morrison cleared her throat, patient but insistent. Sir, I appreciate your kindness, but we need to follow procedure. Emma needs to be placed with Child Protective Services until we locate her mother or arrange foster care pending investigation into her situation and family background. The word procedure landed on Emma like a blow. Her body went rigid. She shook her head frantically. No, no, you said I wouldn't have to leave. You said we'd find, you said, we will try to find your mom, sweetheart, but you can't stay at the station while we look. You need to be somewhere safe. I'm safe here. Emma, James's voice cut through the rising panic, calm, steady, the voice he used in boardrooms when negotiations threatened to explode into chaos. Look at me. She looked. Nobody is taking you away, James said. Not like this. Not without you understanding what's happening and having a choice in how we move forward. Morrison started to protest. James raised one hand, subtle but clear. Wait. Emma, he continued, never breaking eye contact with the girl, you've been very brave. You waited like your mom asked. You kept your things safe. You survived. That took courage most adults don't have. You should be proud. Emma's chin trembled. But now you need help. Your mom would want you somewhere warm and safe while people look for her. Not because you did anything wrong. Not because anyone is giving up. Because taking care of yourself is how you honor the promise she asked you to keep. What promise? To wait. To be here when she comes back. Right? Emma nodded. Well, you kept that promise. For 5 days you kept it. And that means your mom was right to trust you. She knew you were strong enough. James paused, letting the words sink in. Now I'm asking you to trust me. Will you do that? I don't know you. No, you don't, but I'm here. And I'm not leaving. He said it like a vow, like a contract signed in blood. If you come with me, I'll make sure you are safe. I'll make sure people look for your mom. And I'll bring you back to this platform every single day, if that's what you need, I promise. Promises get broken. Yes, James agreed. They do. But this one won't, not by me. Emma looked at the platform behind her, at the bench where she'd slept, at the space where waiting had become her entire world. Then she looked at James, at his cold face and expensive suit and eyes that held something she recognized because she saw it every time she looked in a mirror. Loneliness so deep it had become identity. Okay, Emma whispered. The word was barely audible, but it changed everything. Detective Morrison stared at James like he had just announced his intention to fly to the moon using only willpower and privilege. Sir, she said carefully, voice tight with the professionalism that barely concealed exasperation, you can't just walk into a police matter involving an abandoned minor and offer to take custody based on a 2-minute conversation, no matter how well-intentioned your motives appear to be given your obvious concern. James stood, brushing dirt from his knees, briefcase forgotten on the floor beside Emma's suitcase. I'm not offering to take custody. I'm offering a temporary solution while you process this situation according to proper channels and legal requirements. We have protocols for exactly this scenario. Child Protective Services has trained professionals, background-checked foster families, facilities designed specifically for children in crisis requiring immediate placement pending investigation. How long does that process take? Morrison hesitated. Depends on availability. Could be a few hours. Could be overnight. And in the meantime, Emma would be in protective custody at the station while we complete intake paperwork, contact CPS, arrange placement, conduct initial interviews to establish identity and circumstances. At a police station, it's safe. It's terrifying, James countered. You're asking a 6-year-old who's been living on the streets to sit in a building full of strangers in uniform while bureaucracy grinds through forms. She'll be traumatized further by a system designed for efficiency rather than compassion. Sir, I understand your concern, but these are trained professionals who handle situations like this regularly with appropriate sensitivity given the vulnerable population we serve. I'm sure they do their best, but their best still means Emma spends tonight in an institutional setting after spending 5 nights sleeping on a bench because she was too afraid to ask for help and too loyal to abandon the one person who matters to her. Morrison's jaw tightened. Officer Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Emma watched the exchange, eyes moving between adults like a spectator at a tennis match, trying to understand the rules of a game played with her future as the prize. James pressed his advantage. Call CPS. Initiate your protocols. But let me take her somewhere warm while you do the paperwork. A hotel room, dinner, a bed, basic humanity while the system catches up to reality. You're a complete stranger. So are your trained professionals. They're vetted, you're not. Then vet me. James pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, held it out. Call my office. Call my board chairman. Call my attorney. I'm CEO of Hartwell Industries. I have no criminal record. I pay more in taxes than most people earn in a lifetime. Run every background check you want while Emma eats a hot meal instead of sitting under fluorescent lights answering questions from people who will forget her name by tomorrow. Morrison studied him, really studied him, looking past the suit and the cold face to whatever truth lived underneath. She had been a cop for 15 years. She had seen every kind of human behavior, from heroic to monstrous and everything in between. She had developed instincts about people, about which ones could be trusted and which ones wore masks that hid rot. She looked at Emma. Honey, how do you feel about this? Emma clutched her rabbit tighter. Will you look for my mom? Yes, I promise we'll look. Will he bring me back here tomorrow? I don't know if that's... Morrison caught herself, softened. If Mr. Hartwell keeps his promise, then yes. Emma turned to James. You promise? I promise. Then okay. Morrison closed her eyes briefly, praying to whatever gods protected children from bad decisions made by adults who thought they knew better. Then she pulled out her radio. Dispatch, this is Detective Morrison at Union Station. Need you to run a background check. Subject name James Hartwell. Date of birth. She looked at James expectantly. He provided the information. She relayed it. The radio crackled. 30 seconds passed. Then a voice, distorted by static but clear enough. Subject clean. CEO Hartwell Industries. No wants, no warrants. Credit score over 800. 3 residences registered. No prior CPS involvement. No red flags. Morrison lowered the radio. You're lucky. It's not luck, James said quietly. It's privilege. But I'm willing to use that privilege for something that matters if you're willing to trust me for the next 24 hours. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen. You have my word. Your word and $2 buys coffee. I need more than that. James pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, wrote on the back. My personal cell. Call anytime. I'll answer immediately. You want me to check in every hour? I'll check in every hour. You want live location tracking? I'll enable it. Whatever you need to feel confident that Emma is safe, and this isn't some elaborate scheme that doesn't make sense, because I have zero motive beyond basic human decency, which I realize looks suspicious coming from someone in my position. Morrison took the card, studied the handwritten number. Then she made a decision that would either save a child or haunt her nightmares. 24 hours. I'm calling CPS now. They'll want to interview Emma tomorrow morning. You'll bring her to the station at 9 a.m. sharp. If you're late, I issue a warrant. If Emma shows any signs of distress, neglect, or abuse when I see her, I arrest you regardless of your background or credentials. Clear? Crystal. Morrison knelt beside Emma again. Sweetheart, Mr. Hartwell is going to take care of you tonight. Tomorrow, you'll come talk to me and some other nice people who want to help. Is that okay? Emma nodded, too exhausted to process the full implications of what was happening, only understanding that she wasn't being taken away immediately, that the man with the sad eyes had kept his first promise by letting her choose. Good girl. Morrison stood, handed James her card. My number's on there. Call if you need anything. And Mr. Hartwell? Yes? Thank you for caring when most people would have walked past and pretended they didn't see. James accepted the card without comment. What could he say? That he had almost walked past? That he had been 15 feet from the coffee shop when that small sound stopped in him cold? That he had no idea why he was doing this, except that something in Emma's eyes reflected something in his own soul that he'd been trying to ignore for 30 years? He picked up Emma's suitcase with one hand, his briefcase with the other. Emma held her rabbit, watching him, waiting for the next thing because waiting was what she knew how to do. Ready? James asked. Emma took a breath. Will the food be warm? The question hit harder than it should have. Warm food. Such a small thing. Such an enormous thing when you'd been eating from garbage cans and accepting charity from strangers who might disappear before finishing their sandwich. Yes, James said. The food will be warm, I promise. Emma slipped her small hand into his large one. Her fingers were cold. James's hand closed around them gently, carefully, as if he were holding something infinitely fragile and infinitely precious. They walked away from Platform 9 together. Behind them, Detective Morrison watched until they disappeared into the crowd. Then she pulled out her phone and called Child Protective Services. The conversation would take 20 minutes. Forms would be filled, protocols would be followed. The machine would turn and Emma Rivera would become case number 5879 in a system designed to protect children from exactly the kind of situation she was walking into right now with a billionaire stranger. Morrison prayed she hadn't just made the worst mistake of her career. At the station entrance, James paused. Snow fell heavier now, wind cutting through the evening, cold enough to make breath visible. His car was gone. David had left when instructed, wouldn't return until James called. The airport express had departed 15 minutes ago. The meeting in Chicago would begin in 2 hours without him. $3 billion hung in the balance of his absence. James looked down at Emma. She looked up at him, eyes huge in her thin face, rabbit clutched under one arm, free hand still holding his. Change of plans, James said. We're not going to the airport. Where are we going? Dinner, then somewhere safe. A hotel? Yes. Emma nodded. That was acceptable. Hotels had heat, and beds, and doors that locked, and maybe for one night she wouldn't have to sleep with one eye open, watching for predators, human and otherwise. They walked out into the snow together. The city stretched before them, lights beginning to glow as evening approached, a million stories unfolding in a million rooms. Soon, one of those rooms would belong to a man who had forgotten how to feel, and a girl who had learned too early to survive. Neither of them knew it yet, but walking out of Union Station was the moment both their lives changed direction. Away from the path they'd been on, towards something neither understood, but both needed more desperately than breath. Behind them, the station continued its eternal rhythm. Trains departed, trains arrived, people left, people came home. Emma and James were somewhere in between, suspended in the space where strangers become something more, where promises made to children reshape the architecture of adult lives, where cold hearts begin the slow thaw that feels like spring arriving after the longest winter ever endured. The snow fell, they walked, and on Platform 9, Detective Morrison stood alone, watching the spot where a little girl had survived 5 days through sheer force of will, thinking about faith and chance and the strange mercy that appears in unexpected forms when it's needed most. She whispered a prayer for Emma Rivera and James Hartwell, strangers bound by circumstance, walking into an uncertain future together. Then she turned and went back to work because there were always more children waiting, more cases to solve, more stories that began with someone lost and afraid and hoping against hope that this time someone would stay. James woke to silence, not the silence of his penthouse where traffic hummed 30 floors below and the city breathed like a sleeping giant. This was different, closer. The silence of holding your breath underwater, the silence before someone screams. He opened his eyes. Hotel suite, 4 seasons. He sat in the armchair beside the bed where Emma slept, neck stiff from hours in the same position, legs numb, suit jacket creased beyond salvaging. Pale light filtered through curtains he hadn't closed. Dawn, Tuesday morning. Emma lay motionless under white sheets, one small hand resting on the red suitcase, positioned carefully beside the bed. Her other hand clutched the torn rabbit to her chest. In sleep, her face looked even younger than 6. Fragile, breakable, the kind of innocence the world destroys without meaning to, just by existing in its careless, grinding way. James stood slowly, joints protesting. He walked to the window, pulled the curtain back an inch. Snow had stopped falling sometime during the night. Manhattan stretched below, white and clean, the city transformed into something almost beautiful in the early light, before traffic and humanity turned pristine to slush. His phone sat on the side table where he'd left it after making calls that lasted until 2 a.m. 14 missed calls, 23 emails, 3 voicemails from board members demanding explanations for his absence in Chicago. One text from Maya, "Sir, they're furious. Call me when you can." He didn't call. He stood at the window watching dawn break over a city that never truly slept. Just pretended, just closed its eyes for a few hours before opening them to the same struggle, wrapped in new light. Behind him, Emma stirred. He turned. She sat up slowly, eyes opening to unfamiliar surroundings, panic flashing across her face before memory caught up to consciousness. Hotel room, white sheets, the man from the train station who had kept his first promise. "You stayed," Emma said, voice rough with sleep. "I promised." She looked at him, really looked, studying his wrinkled suit and tired eyes, and the evidence of a night spent watching over her instead of sleeping. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of trust. The door opening one careful inch. "Are you okay?" Emma asked. The question surprised him. When was the last time someone had asked if he was okay? When was the last time the answer had been anything but fine, regardless of truth? "I'm tired," James admitted, "but I'm okay. Are you hungry?" Emma nodded. Her stomach chose that moment to growl, loud in the quiet room. She pressed her hands against it, embarrassed. "Let's fix that," James said. He called room service, ordered more food than one child could possibly eat. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, fruit, orange juice, milk, toast. Emma watched the phone call with wide eyes, listened to him list dishes like he was reading a menu of impossible things. "That's a lot of food," Emma said when he hung up. "You can eat what you want. The rest we'll save." "For later? For whenever you're hungry again." Emma processed this. Food that would still be there later. Food that wouldn't disappear if she didn't eat it immediately. Food that was hers, unclaimed by others, uncontested. "Can I use the bathroom?" Emma asked. "Of course. You don't need to ask permission. This is your space too." She climbed out of bed carefully, feet touching carpet that had probably cost more than her mother earned in a month. She picked up a small backpack James hadn't noticed before, hidden under the suitcase. She clutched it close and walked to the bathroom, closing the door with a soft click. Water ran. James heard sounds of washing, teeth being brushed. When Emma emerged 15 minutes later, she wore the same clothes from yesterday, but her face was clean, hair dampened and partially combed with fingers. She had tried to make herself presentable. The effort broke something in James's chest. Room service arrived on a rolling cart, white tablecloths and silver domes covering dishes that steamed when revealed. Emma stood frozen, staring at the abundance like someone witnessing a miracle they didn't quite believe in. The server arranged everything on the suite's dining table, accepted James's generous tip without comment on the CEO eating breakfast with a small child at 6:30 in the morning. When the door closed, James gestured to the table. "Sit, eat, take your time." Emma sat. She looked at the pancakes, at the eggs arranged artfully on fine china, at fruit cut into shapes that suggested someone in the kitchen cared about a presentation. She picked up a fork, put it down, picked it up again. "Is this really for me?" Her voice was small, uncertain, like she expected the food to be snatched away at any moment. "Yes." "All of it?" "All of it." Emma lifted the fork to the pancakes, cut a piece with surgical precision, brought it to her mouth. She chewed slowly, eyes closing, savoring the taste of something warm and sweet and prepared with care rather than scavenged from what others left behind. The second bite came faster, then the third. Soon she was eating with the focused intensity of someone who had known hunger intimately, who understood that meals were never guaranteed, that every bite might be the last for hours or days. James poured orange juice, set the glass beside her plate. Emma drank, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, then noticed the cloth napkin and used that instead, mimicking the manners she had seen somewhere, probably from her mother before illness made everything harder. "My mom taught me table manners," Emma said suddenly, unprompted. She said just because we don't have money doesn't mean we can't have dignity. James felt the words land like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. "Your mother sounds wise." "She is, was, is." Emma's face crumpled briefly before she forced it smooth again. I don't know what tense to use when someone's gone, but might come back. Present tense is fine, until we know otherwise. Emma nodded, grateful for permission to keep hoping. She ate more slowly now, the initial desperation fading into enjoyment. Between bites, she watched James with curious eyes. You're not eating, Emma observed. I'm not hungry. My mom says breakfast is the most important meal. Your body needs fuel after sleeping all night because it's been fasting and your blood sugar gets low, and that affects your ability to concentrate and make good decisions throughout the day. The clinical explanation delivered in a 6-year-old's voice would have been funny in other circumstances. Instead, it was heartbreaking. A child parroting lessons taught by a mother trying to give her daughter every advantage when advantages were measured in knowledge rather than money. Your mom is right, James said. I should eat. He took a piece of toast, bit into it without tasting anything. Emma watched him eat, satisfied he was following the rules she had been taught to follow. Do you have a mom? Emma asked. She died when I was young, younger than you. Oh, Emma thought about this. That must have been hard. It was. Do you remember her? James paused, toast forgotten. Did he remember her? Images came, fragmented, unreliable. A woman's laugh, hands braiding his hair before school, the smell of something baking. But the memories were worn smooth by time, more impression than detail, like photographs left in sunlight until the faces faded to ghosts. Some things, James said, not as much as I wish I did. I'm scared I'll forget my mom, Emma whispered. If she doesn't come back soon, I'm scared I'll forget what her voice sounds like, or how she smells, or the way she sings when she thinks nobody's listening. James set down the toast. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, making himself smaller, less imposing. Emma, listen to me. You won't forget. The people we love stay with us, even when they're not physically present. They shape who we are, how we see the world, what we believe matters. Like your brother? The shift caught him off guard. Yes, like my brother. What was his name? Thomas. What was he like? The question hung in the air between them. What was Thomas like? How do you explain a person to someone who never met them? How do you compress a life into words that capture the essential truth without drowning in details? James looked out the window at the city waking up, at people beginning their commutes, their routines, their ordinary lives that would continue regardless of who lived or didn't made or mattered. Thomas was good, James said finally. Better than me, kinder. He believed people deserve second chances, third chances, as many chances as it took for them to become who they were meant to be. Emma listened, fork forgotten, sensing something important happening. We didn't agree on much, James continued. I thought success meant building things, companies, wealth, legacy. Thomas thought success meant helping people. He volunteered at shelters, spent his inheritance on strangers who needed it more than he did. Drove me crazy because I thought he was wasting his potential on lost causes. Were they lost? No. The admission hurt. They were just people who needed help, and Thomas helped them because that's who he was. Someone who saw suffering and couldn't walk past it. Someone who stayed when staying was hard. Emma absorbed this. He sounds like my mom. Maybe they were alike. Did you fight, you and Thomas? James closed his eyes, remembered the last conversation. Thomas standing in his office, face flushed with frustration, hands gesturing at the walls covered in graphs and projections and all the evidence of James's success. The memory came unbidden, unwanted, sharp as broken glass. 5 years ago, Thomas 30 years old, James 35. The office looking exactly the same as it did now, eternal and unchanging. Thomas had come to ask for something, though James couldn't remember what. Money for a shelter, support for a program, something that required James to care about people he would never meet. You don't know how to love anything except your empire, Thomas had said, voice shaking with emotion James couldn't access. You're exactly like grandfather. Cold, efficient, alone. I'm not alone, James had countered. I have thousands of employees, colleagues, a board that respects my decisions. That's not the same as having someone who cares if you are happy. Happiness is overrated. Success is measurable. Thomas had looked at him with something close to pity. You're going to be a very successful, very lonely man, James. And someday you'll realize the difference between those things. I hope it's not too late when you do. He had walked out. They didn't speak for 2 weeks. Then Thomas died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday, driving too fast on a highway slick with oil and regret. And James never got to tell him that maybe he was right. Maybe success without connection was just expensive emptiness dressed in Italian suits. James opened his eyes. Emma was watching him with the intensity children bring to adult pain they don't fully understand but recognize as real. We fought, James said quietly. The last time I saw him, we fought. And then he died. And I never got to apologize. What did you fight about? He wanted me to be different. I didn't want to change. Did you change? The question pierced straight through 30 years of carefully constructed armor. Did he change? Was he changing right now, sitting in a hotel room with a homeless child instead of closing a $3 billion deal in Chicago? Was transformation something that happened in thunderbolt moments or in quiet choices made at train stations when nobody was watching? I don't know, James admitted. I'm trying. Emma nodded solemnly, accepting his honesty. She picked up her fork, ate more pancakes. James's phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again, the world demanding his attention, his decisions, his participation in the machine that ground forward regardless of individual human drama. Do you need to answer that? Emma asked. No. Are you sure? It keeps buzzing. I'm sure. Emma seemed satisfied. She finished her pancakes, drank more juice, looked at James with an expression somewhere between gratitude and confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of affection, fragile and uncertain. James, Emma said carefully, testing the name, the familiarity. Can I ask you something? Always. Are we going to look for my mom today? The question he'd been dreading, the answer he didn't have. How do you tell a 6-year-old that finding her mother meant making phone calls to hospitals and morgues, meant checking unidentified admissions and Jane Does, meant preparing for outcomes that range from reunion to tragedy? But before James could answer, his phone rang. Not a text, a call. Maya's name on the screen. He almost ignored it, then remembered he had asked her to search, to find, to use every resource at his disposal to locate a woman named Sarah Rivera who might be dying alone in a hospital somewhere while her daughter waited at a train station for a return that might never come. James answered. Tell me. Maya's voice came through, professional but careful, the tone she used when delivering news that could go either way. Sir, I found something. Woman admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital 5 nights ago. No ID, severe pneumonia, listed as Jane Doe, matches the description and timeline Detective Morrison provided. James's heart stopped, started again. Is she alive? Yes, critical but stable. Dr. Michael Chen is the attending physician. I spoke to him this morning. She's been unconscious most of the admission, but she's improving. Surgery was performed yesterday to drain fluid from her lungs. Prognosis is cautiously optimistic if she continues responding to treatment. Relief hit like a wave, then caution. Name? Did anyone identify her? No, she had no wallet, no phone, nothing when she collapsed. But sir, there's something else. When she's been conscious, the nurses say she keeps asking for someone. A name, Emma. James looked at the girl sitting across from him, syrup on her chin, hope dawning in her eyes as she read his expression, and understood that something had changed. Where's the hospital? James asked. 20 minutes from your location. I can have a car there in 5. Send it. He hung up. Emma was standing now, hands gripped together, rabbit clutched under one arm, body vibrating with tension and hope and terror all competing for dominance. You found her, Emma whispered. Not a question. A prayer. Maybe. A woman at a hospital. She's been sick. She's been asking for someone named Emma. Emma's face crumpled. Tears spilled, hot and fast. But this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of every emotion compressed into one moment. Relief and fear and love and hope all breaking through the dam she'd built to survive 5 nights alone. James stood, walked to her, knelt down. He didn't touch her. He just stayed close, steady, a presence she could lean on if she needed to. Is she okay? Emma managed through tears. She's sick, but she's getting better. Can we see her? Right now, can we go? Yes, get your things. The car will be here soon. Emma ran to the bed, grabbed the suitcase, held it like a shield and a treasure all at once. She wiped her eyes, tried to compose herself, failed. She looked at James with an expression that held everything a child feels when the world might be about to give back something precious it had taken away. What if she doesn't recognize me? Emma whispered. What if she's too sick? What if I'm too late? James took her small face in his hands, gentle but firm, making sure she heard every word. Then we'll face it together. But Emma, she's alive. She's been asking for you, oh. That means she never stopped trying to get back. She never stopped being your mom. Emma nodded, swallowed hard, forced herself to breathe. Then she did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and hugged James, arms wrapping around his waist, face pressing against his expensive suit that smelled like hotel soap and uncertainty. James froze. Then slowly, carefully, he put his arms around her small shoulders and held her. Not tight, not possessive, just steady. There. They stood like that for a long moment, a man who had forgotten how to feel and a girl who felt too much, finding comfort in the shared space between fear and hope. Then James's phone buzzed. The car had arrived. They broke apart, both slightly embarrassed, neither sure what had just happened, except that something had shifted in the architecture of their temporary alliance. Emma wiped her eyes again. James straightened his tie. They looked at each other, nodded, and walked toward the door. Behind them, the hotel room held evidence of their brief occupation. Dishes on the table, rumpled sheets, the ghost of transformation that happens when strangers become something closer to family, even if neither knows what to call it yet. The hallway was silent. The elevator descended in silence. The lobby passed in a blur. And then they were outside, cold morning air hitting their faces. A black car waiting at the curb with a driver who opened the door without questions because Maya had briefed him on the situation and discretion was part of the job. Emma climbed in, suitcase first, then herself. James followed. The door closed. The car pulled into traffic that was building toward rush hour, toward the chaos of Tuesday morning when the city remembered it had places to be and people to move. Emma pressed her face against the window, watching buildings slide past, fingers drumming against her knee in nervous rhythm. James sat beside her, checking his phone one last time before everything changed. 23 new emails, voicemails from board members, texts from Robert Caldwell marked urgent. He ignored them all, turned the phone to silent, put it in his pocket. How far? Emma asked. 20 minutes. That's a long time. Not when you've waited 5 days. Emma looked at him. Is it weird that I'm scared? I wanted to find her so bad. And now I'm scared. No, James said, it's not weird. Hope is terrifying because it means caring about an outcome you can't control. Safer to expect nothing. Safer to feel nothing. But safer isn't the same as better. Emma thought about this. You sound like you know a lot about being scared. I do. What are you scared of? The question was innocent, honest, the way children ask things that adults spend lifetimes avoiding. What was James scared of? Failure? Irrelevance? Becoming his grandfather? Dying alone in a hospital room with nobody holding his hand because everyone who might have cared was too afraid or too damaged to show up? Being exactly what Thomas said he was, a very successful, very lonely man who built an empire and lost his soul. I'm scared of not mattering, James said finally, of going through life without touching anyone's life in a way that makes them better for having known me. Emma processed this with the gravity of someone much older. You matter to me. The words landed like a blow, simple, true, devastating in their honesty. Thank you, James said, voice rough. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Buildings gave way to different buildings. Neighborhoods shifted. The hospital appeared ahead, gray concrete and glass. The universal architecture of healing and dying that looked the same in every city. The car pulled to the curb. The driver opened the door. Emma climbed out, suitcase in hand, rabbit under her arm, every muscle tense with anticipation and dread. James followed. They walked toward the entrance together. Automatic doors open. They stepped into the smell of antiseptic and illness, in the peculiar quiet that hospitals cultivate, sound dampened by necessity and sorrow. A nurse at the information desk looked up. James gave the room number Maya had provided. The nurse directed them to the third floor, East Wing. They took the elevator, standing side by side, watching numbers climb. Emma's hand found James's. He squeezed gently. Neither spoke. The elevator doors opened. The hallway stretched before them, rooms on either side, the sound of monitors beeping in mechanical rhythm, keeping time with hearts still beating despite everything working against them. Room 318. The door was closed. Emma stopped walking. She stared at the door like it might explode. James waited, patient, letting her process what came next. "What if she doesn't want to see me?" Emma whispered. "She does. She's been asking for you." "What if I'm not what she remembers? What if I'm different now?" "Then she'll love who you've become because that's what mothers do." Emma took a breath, another, then she reached for the door handle. Before she could turn it, the door opened from inside. Doctor. Michael Chen stood there, 48 years old, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing scrubs, and the expression of someone who had delivered this news before and knew it never got easier. "You must be Emma," Dr. Chen said gently. Emma nodded. "Your mom's been waiting for you. She's weak, but she's awake, and she very much wants to see you." Dr. Chen stepped aside. The room opened before them. And there, in a hospital bed surrounded by machines and tubes and all the apparatus of modern medicine, trying to repair what poverty and circumstance had broken, lay Sarah Rivera. Thin, pale, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with effort, but alive. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, every hope and fear colliding in the moment before everything changed. Then Sarah's eyes opened. For one eternal second, Sarah Rivera stared at the doorway without comprehension, morphine and exhaustion making the world soft around the edges, reality blending with fever dreams she'd been having for 5 days. Then her eyes focused, saw the small figure in the red coat, saw the dark curls and thin face, and the rabbit with the torn ear. "Emma," Sarah breathed, voice barely audible. Emma broke. She ran across the room, suitcase abandoned, rabbit falling, all the careful control she had maintained for 5 days shattering like glass. She climbed onto the chair beside the bed, small hands reaching for her mother's face, touching her cheeks, her hair, her hands, confirming reality through sensation because sight alone wasn't enough. "Mommy," Emma sobbed. "Mommy, you're here, you're here, you're here." Sarah tried to sit up, couldn't, settled for pulling Emma as close as tubes and weakness allowed. Her own tears came, hot and endless, soaking into Emma's hair as she held her daughter with whatever strength remained. "Baby," Sarah whispered, voice breaking on every syllable. "My baby girl, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried. I tried to come back. I tried so hard. I know, I waited. Like you said, I waited right there and I didn't move. And I kept everything safe and I knew you'd come back. I knew it. I knew it." They held each other while the world shrank to just this, mother and daughter, 5 days of separation, 5 nights of fear, all of it compressed into one moment of reunion that hurt as much as it healed, because love always does both, always breaks you open to let you feel what matters. James stood near the door, watching, feeling something crack open in his chest that had been sealed since childhood. He turned away, giving them privacy, giving himself distance from emotions he wasn't sure how to process. Doctor. Chen stood in the hallway, writing notes on a chart, allowing the reunion to happen without medical intervention because sometimes healing requires more than medicine. Minutes passed. Emma's sobs quieted to hiccups. Sarah's grip loosened as exhaustion pulled at her. But neither let go completely. They stayed close, breathing together, existing in the same space again after days of terrifying separation. Finally, Sarah noticed James. Her eyes found him standing by the window, turned partially away, expensive suit and tired face at odds with the hospital room's sterile simplicity. "Who?" Sarah managed, voice hoarse from disuse and illness. "Who are you?" Emma pulled back, wiped her eyes, looked between her mother and James. That's James. He helped me. Sarah studied him with a mother's wariness, the instinct that asked questions before trusting, that saw danger in kindness from strangers because the world had taught her that nothing came without cost. Helped how? Sarah's hand tightened on Emma protectively. James turned, met her eyes. I found her at Union Station. She'd been waiting for you. I made sure she was safe until we could locate you. Union Station. Pain crossed Sarah's face. You were at the station? For how long? 5 days, Mommy. But it's okay. I was safe. James took care of me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. Different this time. Shame. Guilt. The crushing weight of a mother who had failed to protect her child, who had left her daughter alone in the world through circumstances beyond control, but felt like personal failure nonetheless. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered to Emma. I'm so sorry, baby. I went to the clinic just for medicine, just for a prescription. But I collapsed, and I woke up here. And I couldn't tell them who I was or where you were because I couldn't think straight, and everything hurt, and I kept trying to say your name, but the words wouldn't come, and I thought I'd lost you. I thought you'd be taken somewhere, and I'd never find you again. Shh, Emma soothed, the child comforting the parent in a reversal that broke James's heart. I'm here, we're both here, it's okay now. But Sarah was looking at James again, trying to understand. Why would you help us? You don't know us. James had been asked this question already, by Detective Morrison, by himself in the quiet hours of the night watching Emma sleep. He still didn't have an answer that captured the whole truth, the complicated mix of recognition and guilt, and something breaking open that he didn't know how to name. Because I could, James said simply, and because your daughter asked one question that changed everything. What question? You won't leave, right? Sarah absorbed this. Understanding flickered across her face. She saw what James saw, the loneliness, the walls built so high that nothing got in or out, the success that looked like victory from outside but felt like prison from within. Thank you, Sarah said finally, for staying. James nodded, couldn't speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. Dr. Chen returned, knocked gently on the doorframe. I hate to interrupt, but I need to discuss Sarah's treatment plan. Emma, would you like to wait outside for a few minutes with Mr. Hartwell while I talk to your mom? Emma looked at Sarah, who nodded. It's okay, baby. Go with James. I'll be right here. Emma climbed down from the chair reluctantly, picked up her rabbit, took James's hand. They walked into the hallway together. Dr. Chen closed the door behind them, began explaining in quiet tones what Sarah needed to hear about her condition, her prognosis, the long road to recovery that stretched ahead. James and Emma stood in the hallway hand in hand, listening to the sounds of the hospital around them. Machines beeping, nurses talking in low voices, someone crying 2 rooms down, someone laughing 3 rooms over. Life and death and everything between happening simultaneously in rooms separated by walls too thin to contain the enormity of what each held. She's really there, Emma said, voice full of wonder. She's really okay. She's sick, James corrected gently, but she's alive, and she's going to get better. Because of you. No, because of doctors and medicine and her own strength. Emma looked up at him. And because of you, if you hadn't helped me find her, I wouldn't know where she was. I'd still be at the station waiting. James squeezed her hand. Then I'm glad I was there. They stood together in the hallway, waiting for Dr. Chen to finish, neither knowing that the conversation happening behind that closed door would determine everything that came next. Neither knowing that the cost of healing would be higher than either could pay alone. Neither knowing that the simple act of James saying yes at a train station had set in motion a chain of events that would require him to choose between the empire he built and the family he was building. One promise at a time. Inside room 318, Dr. Chen was explaining numbers that translated to money that translated to impossibility for a woman who cleaned offices at night and served coffee during the day. Sarah listened, face going paler with each figure. Surgery, medications, recovery time, physical therapy, hospital stay. The math of survival in a country where healthcare was a luxury and poverty was a pre-existing condition. I can't pay this, Sarah whispered. I don't have insurance. I don't have savings. I can't. Dr. Chen had heard this before, too many times. There are programs, assistance. We can work with you on payment plans. I can't pay anything, not even small amounts. I was barely surviving before I got sick. Now I can't work. I can't afford rent. I can't afford food. How am I supposed to afford $200,000 in medical bills? The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Outside, James's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Robert Caldwell, marked urgent. He answered. Caldwell. James, where the hell are you? Chicago's threatening to walk. The board is ready to vote you out. You're destroying everything over some random kid. Get back here now. James looked at Emma, looked at the closed door where Sarah lay, learning that surviving meant drowning in debt she could never repay. Looked at the choice being offered in the voice of a man who spoke for the empire, for success, for everything James had spent 15 years building. No, James said quietly. What? I said no, tell the board whatever they need to hear. I'm not leaving. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He hung up, turned the phone off completely, put it in his pocket. Emma watched him, understanding more than she should at 6 years old. Was that about me? It was about choices, James said, and I'm choosing to stay. The door opened. Dr. Chen stepped out, expression grave. He looked at James. Mr. Hartwell, could I speak with you for a moment? To be continued. Dr. Chen led James down the hallway, away from Emma, who stayed near her mother's door, rabbit clutched tight, eyes following James with trust he hadn't earned but desperately didn't want to break. They stopped beside a window overlooking the hospital parking lot. Snow melted in the morning sun. Cars arrived bringing visitors to the sick and dying. Life continued in its relentless forward motion, indifferent to individual suffering. Mr. Hartwell, Dr. Chen began, choosing words carefully, Sarah's condition is serious but treatable. The surgery yesterday was successful. Her lungs are responding to antibiotics. With proper care, she'll make a full recovery. James waited for the other shoe to drop. It always did. The problem is the question, Dr. Chen continued. Surgery, hospital stay, medications, follow-up care. We're looking at approximately $200,000. Sarah has no insurance, no savings. She was barely surviving before this happened. What happens if she can't pay? We'll treat the immediate emergency, then discharge her with prescriptions she can't afford and follow-up appointments she won't keep because she can't take time off work she doesn't have. She'll get sicker, end up back here in worse condition. The cycle continues until something breaks permanently. James looked through the window at the parking lot, at people walking toward the entrance carrying flowers and hope, at the machinery of healthcare that worked beautifully if you could pay and failed catastrophically if you couldn't. What about programs? Assistance? Takes months to process. Requires documentation Sarah doesn't have. And even if approved, it covers maybe 30% of the cost. The rest falls on her. James turned from the window. What if I pay? Dr. Chen blinked. Sir? The bill. All of it. What if I cover everything? That's extremely generous. But Mr. Hartwell, we're talking about $200,000, possibly more depending on recovery complications and therapy requirements. I understand numbers, doctor. I'm asking what happens if money isn't the obstacle. What does Sarah need to actually heal? Dr. Chen studied him, searching for the angle, the catch, the reason a billionaire would throw money at a stranger's medical bills. James had learned long ago that people couldn't comprehend kindness from the wealthy. It had to be tax evasion or publicity or some complicated scheme because simple human decency didn't scale with net worth. She needs 4 more weeks here, Dr. Chen said slowly. Then 8 weeks of rest and physical therapy, medications daily, follow-up appointments weekly, and somewhere stable to recover because stress impedes healing and Sarah's life has been nothing but stress for years. Done. Mr. Hartwell, you should think about this. Talk to your financial advisors. Consider the implications. I have. Send the bills to my office, all of them. And doctor? James handed him a business card. If Sarah needs anything, specialists, experimental treatments, anything that gives her the best possible outcome, you call me directly. Don't let cost be a factor in medical decisions. Dr. Chen took the card with trembling fingers. In 15 years of practicing medicine, He'd seen families bankrupted by illness, children denied treatment because insurance deemed it unnecessary, people choosing death over debt. He'd never seen someone just decide to fix it with a checkbook and genuine concern. "Why, Tan?" Dr. Chen asked. "You don't know this woman." James thought about Thomas, about standing at his grave alone, about 30 years of building walls so high nothing could get in or out, about a 6-year-old girl asking if he would stay and meaning it with her whole heart. "Because I can," James said, "and because someone I love tried to teach me that wealth without purpose is just expensive emptiness. I'm trying to learn the lesson before it's too late." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "I'll make the arrangements. Sarah should know, though, this is her medical care, her decision. Of course, tell her whatever she needs to hear, but make sure she understands that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." They walked back toward room 318. Emma sat on the floor outside, back against the wall, drawing on a piece of paper a nurse had provided. She looked up as they approached. "Is Mom okay?" "She's going to be fine," Dr. Chen assured her. "Mr. Hartwell and I were just discussing her treatment plan." Emma looked at James, reading his expression the way children learn to read adults when survival depended on it. "You're going to help her." "If she'll let me." Emma stood, walked to him, slipped her small hand into his large one. "She will, because she's smart, and smart people accept help when they need it." James squeezed her hand gently. "When did you get so wise?" "Mom taught me. She said pride is just fear wearing a fancy hat." Despite everything, James smiled. Sarah Rivera sounded like someone he'd like to know. Someone Thomas would have loved. Dr. Chen opened the door. Sarah lay propped against pillows, color slightly better than before, eyes clearer. She watched James enter with wariness and something else, hope, maybe, or just exhaustion from fighting battles she couldn't win alone. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said gently, "Mr. Hartwell has offered to cover your medical expenses, all of them. I wanted to discuss this with you before making any decisions about your treatment plan going forward." Sarah's face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, shame, anger, relief, back to shame. "I can't accept that," Sarah whispered. "Mom," Emma started, but Sarah raised a hand. "Baby, go with the nurse. Get about a snack from the cafeteria. Let me talk to Mr. Hartwell alone." Emma looked uncertain. James nodded. "I'll be here when you get back, I promise." Emma left reluctantly, hand in hand with a nurse who had seen this conversation play out before, who knew that pride and poverty fought their fiercest battles in hospital rooms where the price of living was too high for most people to pay. When the door closed, Sarah turned to James. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." James pulled a chair beside her bed, sat down, met her eyes with honesty that felt like exposure. "3 years ago, my brother died. We'd argued the last time we spoke. He told me I was becoming someone cold and empty and successful and alone. I told him to leave, and he did, and he died thinking I didn't care." Sarah listened, saw the pain beneath the expensive suit. "Before he died, he helped you," James continued, "paid your hospital bills when Emma was born, became your friend, did what I should have learned to do but didn't." "Thomas," Sarah breathed. "Thomas Hartwell, that was your brother." "Yes." Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "He saved my life. I was ready to give up. I had nothing. No family, no money, pregnant and alone. Thomas found me outside a clinic. He didn't just give me money, he saw me. Treated me like a person who mattered. Like my baby mattered. He changed everything." "He was good at that," James said quietly. "He talked about you. Said his brother was brilliant but lost. Said he was trying to reach you but didn't know how." "He reached me. I just wasn't listening." Sarah studied him with eyes too wise for someone so young. "You're listening now." "I'm trying." She looked at the ceiling, at the tiles that all looked the same, institutional and cold. "I can't pay you back, not in my lifetime, not in Emma's lifetime. $200,000 is more money than I'll see in 10 years. I'm not asking for repayment." "Then what are you asking for?" James thought about Emma's hand in his, about watching her eat pancakes with wonder, about the feeling of being needed by someone who expected nothing except presence. Let me finish what Thomas started, James said. Let me help. Not because you owe me, not because I'm looking for gratitude, but because I have resources that should mean something beyond quarterly earnings reports and shareholder value. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Outside, the hospital continued its rhythm. Monitors beeped. Doctors made rounds. People got better or worse. The world turned. This isn't charity, Sarah said finally. That's what you told Dr. Chen. What is it then? Family, James said, the word feeling strange and right simultaneously. Or the beginning of one, if you'll allow it. Sarah closed her eyes. Tears leaked from beneath her lids. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Acceptance. Trust. The first careful step toward believing that sometimes help came without strings attached. Okay, Sarah whispered. Okay. Yes. Thank you. James felt relief wash over him like absolution. You're welcome. But James, Sarah's voice carried steel beneath the gratitude. If you hurt my daughter, if you let her down, if you make promises you don't keep, I will find a way to make you regret it, regardless of how much money you have or how many lawyers you can afford. James smiled for real this time. I wouldn't expect anything less. The call came 3 days later. James sat in Sarah's hospital room, Emma curled up on the chair beside him, drawing pictures of stick figures holding hands. Sarah slept, color returning to her cheeks, breathing easier as antibiotics did their work. The machines beeped in steady rhythm, healing one heartbeat at a time. Robert Caldwell's name appeared on James's phone. He'd been ignoring calls for 72 hours. This one felt different, final. I need to take this, James told Emma. She nodded without looking up from her drawing. He stepped into the hallway, pressed answer. Caldwell. James. The chairman's voice carried weight and resignation. The board voted this morning. James leaned against the wall, prepared for impact. They've appointed an interim CEO. You're on indefinite leave, not terminated, not fired, but removed from active leadership pending resolution of concerns about your judgment and priorities. The words should have hurt. Should have felt like failure, like losing everything he'd built for 15 years. Instead, James felt nothing except mild relief that the decision had been made for him. I understand, James said. Do you? You built Hartwell Industries. It's your legacy, your grandfather's legacy, and you're throwing it away for a woman and child you've known less than a week. I'm not throwing anything away, Robert. I'm choosing what matters. The company matters. Thousands of jobs matter. Shareholders matter. They do. And the board can protect those interests while I protect something that can't be replaced by quarterly earnings. Silence. Then Caldwell's voice, softer now, almost fatherly. Your brother would be proud of you, James. I want you to know that. I think he'd say you finally figured it out. The words hit harder than any board decision could. James's throat tightened. Thank you. Take your time. Figure out what you're doing. When you're ready, we'll talk about your role going forward. The board's not trying to push you out permanently. They're trying to run a company while you figure out who you want to be. I appreciate that. James, one more thing. I met your grandfather, worked with him for 30 years. He was brilliant and ruthless and died alone in a hospital room with nurses who didn't know his first name. Don't become him. Whatever you're doing right now, whatever you're building with this family, it's worth more than any empire. Caldwell hung up. James stood in the hospital hallway holding a silent phone, feeling the weight of choice settle into his bones. He'd lost the company, or stepped away from it, or been freed from it. The framing depended on perspective. He walked back into room 318. Emma looked up from her drawing. Everything okay? Yes, James said, meaning it. Everything's fine. 6 weeks passed in a rhythm James had never known existed. Mornings meant hospital visits. Emma stayed with James at a hotel near St. Vincent's, sleeping in the adjoining room, eating breakfast together before walking to see Sarah. They developed routines. Emma taught James how to make proper toast, not burnt. James taught Emma chess, losing badly but learning patience in the process. Sarah grew stronger. Color returned. Laughter returned. The machines came off one by one until only the IV remained. Then that too disappeared. Dr. Chen smiled more. Nurses stopped hovering. Recovery became reality instead of hope. Child Protective Services visited weekly. Linda Torres, the caseworker, watched James and Emma together with professional skepticism that gradually softened into something resembling approval. She interviewed Emma privately, inspected the hotel suite, reviewed James's background check for the 15th time. "You're not what I expected," Linda admitted during one visit. "What did you expect? Rich man playing savior, publicity stunt, tax write-off, acts. The usual motivations that look good on paper but fall apart under scrutiny when the novelty wears off and the reality of actual childcare becomes inconvenient." And now, Linda watched Emma reading to Sarah from a library book James had bought, her small voice careful on the big words, Sarah's face glowing with pride and love. "Now I think you might actually care," Linda said quietly, "which is rarer than you'd think." The apartment came next. James found a place 3 blocks from the hospital. 2 bedrooms, warm light, furnished simply but comfortably. He signed a 2-year lease, paid up front, stocked the kitchen with food Sarah mentioned liking during their conversations. When Sarah was discharged 8 weeks after admission, James drove her and Emma to the new apartment himself. Emma ran through rooms touching everything, claiming her bedroom, her space, her home. Sarah stood in the living room crying silently while Emma squealed with joy in the next room. "I can't believe this is real," Sarah whispered. "It's real," James assured her, "for as long as you need it. We'll pay rent. When I can work again, I'll pay you back." "Sarah, this isn't a loan." "Then what is it?" James watched Emma appear into the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun, red suitcase finally retired to her closet because she didn't need to carry everything she owned anymore. "Family takes care of family," James said simply. Sarah hugged him then, quick and fierce, the embrace of someone learning to accept grace after years of fighting alone. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for Emma, for me, for seeing us when the world looked away." James nodded, couldn't speak past the emotion lodged in his throat. Emma ran to them, grabbed both their hands. "Come see my room. I arranged everything perfectly." They followed her, this unlikely family bound by circumstance and choice in equal measure, walking toward a future none of them had imagined 6 weeks ago when a 6-year-old stood alone at a train station refusing to give up hope. 3 months after Union Station, on an ordinary Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday, Emma called James something new. They were in the apartment kitchen. Sarah was at physical therapy. James was attempting to cook dinner from a recipe Emma had declared, "Not that hard if you pay attention." He was failing spectacularly, smoke rising from a pan that contained something that used to be chicken. Emma climbed onto a stool, watched the disaster unfold, tried not to laugh. "Bah," she said casually, reaching for the spatula. "You have to flip it before it burns." James froze. The smoke alarm started beeping. Emma hopped down, opened the window, waved a towel at the detector until it stopped shrieking. She returned to the stove, adjusted the heat, flipped the chicken with practiced ease. "There," she said proudly. "See? Not hard." James stared at her, unable to process anything beyond the single syllable she'd used so naturally, so easily, like it had always been there waiting. "What did you call me?" James asked, voice rough. Emma looked up, suddenly uncertain. "Bah, it's Mandarin. For Dad, Mom taught me. Is that okay? I can call you James if you want. I just thought, since we're family and you're here every day, and you take care of me, and you promised you wouldn't leave and you haven't left, so I thought maybe Ba would be okay, but if it's not, I can..." "Stop, I'm sorry. I should have asked. First, James knelt down, bringing himself eye level with this child who had survived alone through courage and hope, who had chosen to trust him despite every reason not to, who had just given him a gift more precious than anything his wealth could buy. "Emma," James said gently, hands on her small shoulders. "It's more than okay. It's everything." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "Really? You don't mind?" "I'm honored." Emma threw her arms around his neck, holding tight. James held her back, feeling pieces of himself that had been frozen since childhood begin to thaw. This was what Thomas tried to show him. This connection, this meaning, this love that asked nothing except presence and gave everything in return. When they pulled apart, both wiping eyes, the chicken was burning again. They looked at the pan, looked at each other, laughed until they couldn't breathe, until Sarah came home to find them ordering pizza and cleaning smoke damage, and glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from choosing each other despite all logic suggesting they shouldn't work. "What happened here?" Sarah asked, surveying the kitchen disaster. "Ba tried to cook," Emma explained, using the word naturally now, testing it out, making it real. Sarah's eyes found James's. Understanding passed between them. She smiled, small and genuine, and something clicked into place. They were family now, officially, irrevocably. The kind of family not bound by blood, but by choice and promises kept, and showing up day after day after day. 1 year later, James Hartwell stood on Platform 9 at Union Station holding Emma's hand. Sarah stood on Emma's other side, healthy now, working part-time at the Thomas Hartwell Foundation that James had started with his brother's inheritance. The foundation helps single parents, homeless families, children in crisis. It had assisted 200 families in 12 months. The number grew daily. Emma was 7 now, taller, confident in ways she hadn't been before. The red suitcase sat in her closet at home, retired but honored, a reminder of survival and the journey that led her here. They stood at the bench where Emma had waited 5 nights, where fear and hope had fought their battle, where a little girl refused to give up and a cold man remembered how to feel. "It looks different," Emma observed. "How?" James asked. "Smaller, less scary, like it's just a bench now instead of everything." Sarah squeezed Emma's shoulder. "Because you're not alone anymore." They were there to meet someone, a boy, 9 years old, whose foster mother had called the foundation desperate for help. He sat on the same bench Emma had claimed, backpack clutched tight, eyes tracking strangers with the wariness Emma recognized because she'd worn that same expression. Emma walked toward him without prompting. James and Sarah followed. "Hi," Emma said gently. "I'm Emma. What's your name?" The boy looked up, suspicious, scared. "Tyler." "Are you waiting for someone?" "My foster mom. She's late." "That must be scary." Tyler nodded, guard dropping slightly at her understanding. Emma sat beside him on the bench. "I used to wait here too, right on this bench. I was scared for a long time, but then someone helped me, and now I'm okay. Better than okay." Tyler studied her. "Who helped you?" Emma pointed at James. "He did, and now we help other people. That's why we're here, to help you if you want help." Tyler's foster mother arrived then, frantic and apologetic, car trouble making her late, terror in her eyes at the thought of losing this child to a system that swallowed people whole. Sarah approached, introduced herself, explained about the foundation, the resources available, the support they could provide. The foster mother cried with relief. Tyler watched everything with careful eyes, learning that sometimes help came when you needed it most, that sometimes strangers became family, that sometimes the world remembered to be kind. Before leaving, Tyler looked at Emma. "Does it get easier, being scared all the time?" Emma considered seriously. "Yes, but you have to let people help you. You have to trust that some promises get kept." Tyler nodded, absorbing wisdom from someone only 2 years older, but lifetimes wiser. James watched his daughter, this child who had transformed his life by asking one simple question and meaning it with her whole heart. "You won't leave, right?" He hadn't left, wouldn't leave, had found in leaving behind his empire something infinitely more valuable: purpose, connection, love that didn't come with conditions or quarterly reports or the cold mathematics of success. They walked toward the exit together, this family built from broken pieces and brave choices. Snow began to fall, first flakes of winter promising more to come. Emma caught snowflakes on her tongue, laughing, childish again in the way she hadn't been allowed to be during those 5 nights alone. Sarah took James's hand as they walked. Not romantic, just family, just connection. "Thomas would be proud," Sarah said quietly. James thought about his brother, about the last conversation they had had, about all the years wasted building walls that kept everyone out, including himself. "I hope so," James said. "I'm trying to become the man he wanted me to be." "You already are," Sarah assured him. "You already are." They stepped out into the snow, into the city that had witnessed their convergence, into the future they were building one promise at a time. Behind them, Union Station continued its eternal rhythm. Trains departed, trains arrived, people left, people came home. James Hartwell had spent 15 years building an empire, thinking it would fill the emptiness inside him. It took a 6-year-old girl in a red suitcase to teach him the truth. Home isn't a place you arrive at. It's a promise you keep every day, no matter what. And James was keeping his promise. Forever, the end.